I have a question for all of you, if you want to get settled. I actually do have a question, by the way. So, welcome everybody. Before we actually get started, because you're all here early, thank you for being here early. I have a question which says, and feel free to just shout out the answer. We're a small group here. What's the most commonly asked question off of Alexa? And Steve, you're not allowed to answer because you know the answer. Anybody? Most commonly asked question off of Alexa. Let's get creative. Let's get creative. A little more creative. A little more creative.
Alexa, who am I?
Nope. All right, 2 more chances. Last. No, okay. So this was actually a pretty interesting study that was done like a few years ago. One of the most commonly asked question off of Alexa is, Alexa, will you marry me? Right? And, you know, when I heard about this, there's lots of different answers. One of the answers is it's physically not possible since you are on Earth and I'm in the cloud. So that's one of the answers. The other answer is I've decided not to get married until Mars is colonized. So that's another one. Anyway, so thank you for being here early. I know it's a little late, and we're very excited to have you all here. My name is Paras Bua. I'm currently a senior manager at AWS. I've been at AWS for about 9 years, and my team and I work on helping customers with large-scale migrations and modernizations. I also lead a technical field community of a little over 400 folks, and our goal is simple. We provide just-in-time technical support for our customers worldwide, and we also scale our knowledge through repeatable assets like blogs and white papers and these re:Invent talks. So a lot of the talks that you'll see this year, some of them, my team is doing a lot of those. So today I have the pleasure of having Steve from T-Mobile with me. I've been a T-Mobile customer for a very long time, and I've really enjoyed my time with T-Mobile and great service, and I can see how amazing work they've been doing over the years. So thank you, Steve, for joining us. So I want to start off by reading this. This is something that Andy talked about in his 2019 keynote. He said, the first step in transformation is not technical. It's very much about leadership. It's about making sure that you have senior level alignment, aggressive top-down goals that forces the organization to move faster than it otherwise would, the right training, and then a thoughtful, methodical, multi-year plan to make that migration happen. So there are a few things that really stood out to me here. First is senior level alignment, right? And you'll hear from Steve on how they navigated that alignment at T-Mobile that really set them up for success. The next one is having aggressive top-down goals, right? You almost have to have a forcing function and saying, yes, we are going to go do this. We're going to go do this as a team, and we have to succeed at this. The third one is about the people aspect, right? It's very important that we train our people for these new technologies. So it's very important to have the right training. And then transformations is a multi-year project. It's not something that is a 6-month project, right? Depending on the size of your organization, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, it could be even longer. But it's a journey, right? So if you look at the elements of a successful journey, so I've had the pleasure of working with thousands of customers over the years at AWS, along with my teams, and we've put together the top few things that have really mattered and helped customers move the needle forward. The first thing, and I cannot stress this enough, is having the executive sponsorship. You'll have small projects come on. Some will be successful, some will not be. Come on and go, right? But if you're really talking about a large-scale transformation, you really need that executive sponsorship. Otherwise, it just doesn't move. I'm not going to read through all of these, but a couple of other things that really stood out that I thought I'll talk about is the Cloud Center of Excellence. you want to set up the Cloud Center of Excellence early because this is the team that is helping set up the processes, the standards that are required, and all of the things that are needed for every other IT team to be able to migrate and transform their service on AWS or their application, right? The next one is experimentation. And you've heard a lot about how our leadership talks about experimentation, right? And if you think about a lot of the innovation that Amazon has done, it's really come out of a lot of great experiments, right? As you increase the velocity of experimentation, your success rates is higher. Most will not go through, but the some that do will end up doing really well. For example, Kindle was an experiment. AWS was an experiment. Alexa was a huge experiment, right? And now you can see how all of these products are making our customers' lives better every single day. So the experimentation culture is something that we need to get into our teams very early, and we'll talk about this a little more on what it specifically means from a technology perspective in the coming slides. All right, let's talk about the degrees of modernization, right? It starts off with a project, obviously, right? And this is where you typically want that executive support. And executive support is not just a one-time thing. You need it like throughout the journey, right? Because only then do they have that continued focus for their teams to be able to move forward. You've got to set up the right technical foundation. Now, this is a 300-level talk, so I'm not going to focus a lot on the business side. I am going to get technical, so we're going to have some, dive deep into the technology side. The next is, you start off with migrations, right? The first one is, the 3 degrees of modernization, and all of these don't have to be linear. The first one is moving to the cloud. The second one is doing more in the cloud. And the third one is building for the cloud in the cloud, right? And as you do these, you're continuously enabling your teams to be able to innovate, right? Now, as you do your portfolio analysis, a lot of data will come out, right? You'll have applications that can be lifted and shifted to AWS. You'll have applications where you're thinking about modifying the underlying architecture or swapping out components specifically so that those can be modernized, starting on the path of modernization, right? Now, these could be for various reasons. It could be for cost. It could be for efficiency. It could be for scale. It could be for various reasons, right? So just think about the degrees of modernization from a technology perspective as if you're looking at reducing the amount of undifferentiated heavy lifting that you and your technology teams are doing. It's always about taking away burden from the technology teams and letting them do what they best do for their customers. And if you think about it, I've never seen a company succeed based on how well they manage their infrastructure. It just doesn't happen. Look at Airbnb, look at Pinterest, look at T-Mobile, look at all these amazing companies that are really providing meaningful services to their customers, and they are known for that. They are not known for how well they manage their technology infrastructure, right? So, if you think about that, and as we think about that, right, if you really look at the technology stack, you are taking away the undifferentiated heavy lifting in every stage of the modernization process. So the first one, on-premise, you've obviously got to manage everything. Second one, if you're on EC2, we take care of the physical infrastructure, the physical hardware, the physical networking, but everything else rests to you, the customer, right? As you move up the stack and you start going towards managed services like RDS, ECS, you're giving away a little bit of control from a pure management and maintenance standpoint, but you're really helping your teams focus on building features and services and functionality that will help you differentiate your business. And as you go towards the right, it's really about cloud native, cloud-centered architectures using services like API Gateway, Lambda, DynamoDB serverless. This morning, if you watched Adam's keynote, we announced Redshift serverless. We announced a bunch of serverless services. So the intent over there is really for us to work backwards from the customer and take that undifferentiated heavy lifting away from them so that they can go focus on building services and features and functionality that really help them be differentiated in the marketplace, right? So now that we've talked about this, I want to focus our talk on these 4 key pillars for the first for the next 20 minutes, and then we'll have Steve come up and share T-Mobile story. Let's talk about foundational capabilities. And this is where I like to use a metaphor, right? Just imagine for a minute that you are an architect that is responsible for building a brand new international airport and being able to handle like 1,000 flights, massive flights. So what are the things that you have to think about? Well, you've got to think about how are the planes going to come in and out. So you've got to think about runways. You've got to think about, well, how are the planes going to get into the terminal? How are the vehicles supporting the plane going to get inside the airport? How are passengers going to come in? How are passengers going to navigate through security, right? Who's allowed through security, who's not, right? What are the checkpoints? How are you going to set up your customs, immigration, right? Your baggage handling. There's so many things that you've got to think about, right? Now, you might be thinking, well, great, I get it. How does this compare to what I'm going to do on AWS? Well, you have to think about almost similar things. You have to think about who has access to what, how am I going to protect my security, right? How am I going to protect my customer data? How am I going to make sure that my cost doesn't overrun consistently, and I want to make sure that it's within the budget and within the timeline. What compute resources am I going to have? Am I going to give my team service catalog so they can just use approved software from the service catalog? What databases am I going to use? What kind of developer tools am I going to provide for my IT team so they can use? So you've got to think about all of these things before you go and unleash the power of AWS to your technology customers, right? These are the app teams that are building out there. So I'm going to go into this slide. I know there's a lot on this. No, don't panic. We'll cover it, right? So this is the multi-account framework that we recommend, right? So if you look at the very top box in the magenta box, right? That's the AWS Organizations Management account. Now, this is the account that you're going to have, things like your service control policies. You're going to be able to write detective guardrails, preventive guardrails. And when I talk about service control policies, think about anytime you give your customers an account, they cannot, for example, they can't turn off guardrails, right? They have to have guard duty enabled. So there are these basic fundamental things that you have to take care of regardless of what account it is so that you can keep it under the guidelines for your company. And then next we get into the foundational OUs. Right? When you look at the foundational OU, there are two over there, right? One is you've got security, and the second is infrastructure. Now, just like how all of us IT teams are building software for our customers, security and infrastructure is doing the same thing. They are building security tooling, they're building infrastructure services, so things like Terraform, CloudFormation, things that can be used across the organization. They are consistently building for those as well, right? And that's why you see an SDLC account in there, OU, sorry, and you see a production OU, right? So they can also go through the same processes that they expect everybody else to follow. Now, on the right, you've got these OUs that are built specifically for purposes such as a sandbox. Now, think about sandbox as almost a perk, right? For example, what if you gave every new employee in your company a free AWS account with a fixed spending limit? Maybe you have a $100 spending limit on it, right? And the intent of that is for them to be able to go experiment, try new things, and if things work, they can move it into the POC account, right? For example, so you've got that, and obviously this is disconnected from the network. So if anything goes wrong, it's all isolated within that, right? Next, you've got your workloads, pretty self-explanatory. This is where your production workloads sit. Next, you've got your policy staging. So as you're building out, as these other OUs are building out service control policies for their lines of business, you can also have those SCP policies within this OU. And then you've got suspended OUs where suspended accounts go in for a period of time. Maybe it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever the retention policies of your company is, it goes through that. And then you've got these individual business users that have special circumstances. You've got potentially exceptions. You've got your deployment accounts, and so on, right? So this is going to be different for your organization. But this is at a high level. We recommend having these OUs, having separate accounts, because what you're really trying to do with multiple accounts is to limit the blast radius. If something were to go wrong within one account, you can go and shut that account down. Now, if you didn't have that, we're potentially in trouble, right? Because now the vulnerability or the security issues can percolate throughout your rest of your applications, which would be a problem, right? Now you might be thinking, well, obviously you're going to tell me go spin up multiple accounts, basically means more revenue for AWS. Well, no. Guess what? Accounts are free. IAM roles, users are free. There's no charge. The only reason we're advocating that you go with a multi-account approach, with this kind of a setup, you can also use Control Tower, by the way. It'll help you with a lot of it has a really nice graphical user interface. They made tremendous improvements over the last several years to get started, right? So it's really about containing the blast radius and making sure that we are doing everything possible to do two things, and more than two things. One is to incentivize our development community to go experiment, try new things, and build amazing things and release software at the pace that you want. And you'll hear Steve talk about how they increase their software development velocity, right? The software release velocity. And it's also to make sure that you are secure and you're restricting the blast radius. Now, I could talk about this section for a whole hour if I had the time. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. So here are some sessions that my colleagues are doing. If you're interested to learn more in detail, I would highly recommend going to any of these sessions that the team is delivering over the next several days, over the next few days. So now let's talk about migrations, right? And when we talk about migrations, I like to bring up our migration methodology, where we say assess, mobilize, and migrate, and modernize. So the first stage over here in a migration mindset is to understand what's in my data center, what's in my colo facilities, so that I can get a reasonable understanding of what is in there, what do I have to do in the planning phases, and what do I have to move. So now we offer multiple services here. We acquired a company called TSR Logic about 2-3 years ago. Now it's called Migration Evaluator, and you can use Migration Evaluator. They've got multiple connectors that you can source data from various places and really build up a nice TCO report. Because end of the day, guess what? The numbers have to make sense. In order for any kind of a transformation to happen, the numbers must align, and you have to see a reasonable amount of cost savings, right, before you move forward. So there are other mechanisms that we've built at AWS. One of it is the MRA. It's called the Migration Readiness Assessment. It's a 4-hour workshop where we go through a structured list of questions so we can give you an accurate picture of what are the areas where you're awesome at and what are the areas that we have to work together to make sure that you're cloud ready. Right? The next phase is the mobilize phase, right? And this is where we get deeper into the stack, where we really understand, like, what are my network dependencies, right? What are the databases that I potentially want to swap out? And get into detailed portfolio analysis and planning so that I understand the sequencing of moving these things, and also understand what technology changes would I have to make, right? And obviously, we've got a lot of offerings here too. When you look at building with the people side of it, our training teams can help here. Our partner community is doing an amazing job at a lot of the training work that we've been needing, right? They've really been advocates. We've got Migration Evaluator, deeper dive discovery services as well with ADS, for example, where you can understand network dependencies. So we've got a bunch of services and a bunch of features that you can help. So for landing zone, you can easily spin up a landing zone using the control tower that we just talked about. And the third phase is really the migrate phase, and this is where we look at potentially migrating using a factory-based approach, right? So as we get into the factory-based approach, and so this is what a factory looks like. So during your migration planning, you've got a bunch of applications that will fall in either categories, right? One is the rehost, like lift and shift category. Second is maybe re-platform category. And the third is cloud native, which we'll also talk about. But if you really look at this, we've built out repeatable, reusable assets internally that will help customers, and we've published it as well. So this is the Cloud and Dome Migration Factory, which basically takes migration waves, takes data from various sources, and you can have that, it can basically come out as a bunch of EC2 instances or a cluster of EC2 instances, CloudFormation, Terraform, Ansible, Chef, Puppet, whatever you want, Today we provide support for CloudFormation. I know that the team is working on extending that support as well. So check out the Cloud Indoor Migration Factory if you have time. This will help you accelerate the migration pace. So now let's talk about the replatform, basically doing more in the cloud, right? And as I think about it, the first thing that comes in my mind is the strangler pattern, right? And Martin Fowler coined this really well in 2004, where he said, gradually creating a new system around the edges of the old, letting it grow slowly over years until the old system is strangled. So the idea here is to take out pieces of the system and start to build towards a microservices approach, and then over time, being able to sunset or retire that application. Now, we've all got monolith applications in our enterprise. It's not easy. It can be hard to manage these monoliths. And it's usually not something that you can just get rid of in 6 months, right? It's a project, especially if it's been running for 20 years or so. There's a lot of functionality that has been built, and so you have to start to build around it, and then eventually being able to sunset that. So how do you get started? The first thing that I recommend customers do is by starting to map individual components to AWS. So for example, if you're looking at databases, and if you have an Oracle running on-prem, the first thing you would do is you would sit down with your application teams and make decisions on, okay, do we want to replatform this or do we not, right? And if you need to, what's the effort that it's going to take to replatform this? And you can even run that within a factory-based approach. The other one that are more simpler, for example, if you're running on a DNS provider, it's easier to migrate to Route 53, and it's the same thing with content delivery networks as well, right? If you've got your content delivery on another platform, you can move it to Amazon CloudFront and so on. So this is the first step to really think about, well, if I'm going to move from here to here over time, what are those changes that I'm going to make, and how am I going to make that happen? So when I think about moving and creating a newer system around the edges, right? Here's how you do it. So for example, today you've got this, right? This is the first step. The first thing you're going to do is add the proxy and make it service-based, make it service-oriented. And eventually, over time, as you start to make these more service-oriented, you're getting into this architecture where you've got multiple microservices that are supporting your application functionality, and then over time, you're taking things slowly out, right? And then eventually, you can sunset the monolith application that you've got. Now, we've been thinking about this at AWS for a while, as you would imagine, on how do we help customers get away from a monolith to a microservice. So very excited that we launched Migration Hub Refactor Spaces just yesterday. Right, so what this service will allow you to do is to really take your monolith application, which will be sitting in one account, and slowly over time moving into a different account by making it service-oriented. Right? Now, when you think about service orientation and when you think about being true to the SOA concepts, you're really talking about having small individual two-pizza teams that can handle their services on their own. Now, every two-pizza team or every team will have its own expertise. Some of the folks will have expertise in Java, some will have .NET expertise, some will have Python, Node, and even on the database side, some folks might be very comfortable with Postgres, some folks might be comfortable with Oracle. So you want to encourage, as you're doing this transformation, you want to encourage the teams and empower them to give them options on what's best for their service and how they meet their SLAs, right? So, so now let's talk about cloud-native, cloud-centered types of applications, right? Now, I basically put it in there. I said, building for the cloud in the cloud. Now, what does that mean, right? It means that you are actually architecting for the cloud, and you are not bringing in any new or any technical debt from on-premise, right? Now, one of the examples of that is an event-driven architecture. Now, events are asynchronous, right? You have multiple components that you can respond to, and everything doesn't have to be synchronous, right? For example, if you have a photo-based application, right, you can always get the photo uploaded to Amazon S3. You can trigger a Lambda function based on the new photo that has been uploaded, and you can easily create a thumbnail image on that, right? Now, the intent of creating or intent of using like event-driven architectures and having multiple components is for you to have the ability to scale these components individually. And you'll hear from T-Mobile on how they were able to use event-driven architecture, domain-driven designs as they were getting ready to massively scale, right, in their organization. And when I look at that, right, and I thought, okay, it's good to have a cloud-centered example. So, well, let's use the next 2 minutes or so to run through this, right? So if you think about this architecture, it's fully serverless. There's no server-based component anywhere here that you've got to manage. And with serverless, as you all probably know, you only pay for what you use, right? And this morning we announced, if you watched the video or if you were at the keynote, Adam announced Redshift serverless as well. So we are continuously moving towards the serverless point so that we can take the undifferentiated heavy lifting away from you. So in this example, let's use a scenario, right? Let's say you're running a poll across millions of users for a presidential election that's coming up. And so what do you have to do, right? You have to, one, make sure that your app scales. You don't know the demand. It can spike up, it can spike down, it can, based on how customers engage with your application, you've got to be able to scale up and down. Now, how do you do that, right? So in this example, so I built this, the whole session is on YouTube. I even get into the code, get into the specific components with the whole complete demo on, this was a couple of years ago. So I have all of my static content, static assets on Amazon S3. I'm exposing that via CloudFront. Obviously, your browser the domain name is hosted on Route 53. Your browser is getting that from, being served from CloudFront. We are using Amazon Cognito to do some basic authentication. So there's no, so if you wanted to, for example, if you wanted to say only people in the US should be able to access this, so you can have, geo-restriction enabled on Amazon CloudFront, right? And then Amazon API Gateway is really the front end to your, the front door to your backend logic, right? And in this case, I'm using API Gateway to federate, to call a Lambda function, which is then sending data into Amazon DynamoDB. And this table, all it does is it has all of the raw data. And as you can imagine, right, if you have so much of raw data, over time, costs add up because it costs money to store stuff in it, right? So with the raw data, at some point, you don't need it. So what you can do is set a TTL, time to live. So you can set TTL on a record level so that, and I set it at a table level at the time of inserting the record. And then from there, I've subscribed it to a stream. And the stream, all it does is it calls another Lambda function, which aggregates information based on the vote that people chose. So if they chose A versus B, whatever, right? It's basically doing a +1. So the advantage of this kind of an architecture, one is the serverless component, so you don't have that undifferentiated heavy lifting that you're expecting your teams to do. But the other is even cost, right? And the third one is you've got to think about security as well. Right, you've got to think about, well, how do I make sure that nobody's able to call, my API gateway directly, right? So that's why we are using Cognito, and we use that to authenticate into API gateway, right? So really interesting architecture. We solved some interesting challenges with hotkeys and whatnot, right? Hotkeys occur when a partition of DynamoDB table is overloaded, and so you've got to figure out a way so that it doesn't happen. So you've got to get your indexing right. You've got to make sure that you're partitioning it right. So with that, I'd like to welcome Steve Hull from T-Mobile to walk us through the amazing transformation journey that they have been on. Steve?
Thank you. See everybody today. Actually, it's really good to see 3D humans, to be honest with you. I've seen one too many WebEx Zoom calls lately. Let's get into who we are as T-Mobile. Like Pra said, my name is Steve Hull. I've been with T-Mobile about 8 years now. I primarily work in our API Center of Excellence, our Cloud Center of Excellence, and then I also have a group working on how we secure our SDLC and our code throughout T-Mobile. So in 2013, T-Mobile set out effectively to fix what they called a broken industry, and we declared ourselves the Un-carrier. And when we declared ourselves the Un-carrier, our CEO at the time wrote a manifesto, and it was a brilliantly simple piece of work which basically outlined we're going to take care of pain points for our customers. We're going to love our customers. We're going to help our customers be successful. And that's what the Un-carrier is all about. We want it to be different. We want to listen to our customers. Around 2020, we merged with Sprint. Back in 2013, by the way, we're the 4th largest carrier in the United States. In 2020, we merged with Sprint. We're now number 2. We are also the leader in 5G. And we're going to continue to lead in that space. If you're a customer in the audience, Peraso has been a customer a long time. Thank you all. If not, take a look at us. We really are different, and we're good at what we do. So as we talk about the transformation into the cloud, at T-Mobile, the transformation was bigger than just the cloud. We knew to be successful, we knew to be the Un-carrier, we had to rethink how we build software. And the cloud was a big enabler for that. And we chose AWS purely from the standpoint of they were aligned with our corporate values. And everything, when I hear Peraso talk and I go to the sessions here at reInvent, it just reinforces in my mind how much further we have to go to be really good at this. But we're not bad now. We're actually pretty good. We've been at this 8 years now. So I want to start at the very beginning when we first started in the cloud. There were a lot of concerns. It wasn't a slam dunk that we would go to the cloud at T-Mobile. Folks were constantly worried about cost and security and privacy. And cost isn't really what you think. At the end of the day, what people were concerned about is, are engineers going to spin up thousands of EC2 instances and forget that they're running? And we get to the end of the month and we have a really large bill. How are you going to prevent that? The other concern was, we're a very capital-intense industry. How's the OpEx, CapEx mix going to work out as we move to the cloud and we grow in the cloud? And then the other one is, we're also a highly regulated industry. How does moving to the cloud impact the regulation, the financial regulations for T-Mobile? When it comes to security, bottom line, fear. What's the security model? Are we comfortable with the shared security model? Because whether you know it or not, you are sharing the security model with AWS. We're trusting them. They're trusting us to do it right also. And so those were the big things that really started getting in the way. And what's interesting about these topics is we didn't have the answers on day 1. We didn't have it on day 10. I'm not sure what day we had the answers, but you just have to address the concerns. Because if you don't address the concerns, what's going to happen is it's going to get a groundswell and it's going to get negative momentum. And you're going to be fighting that negative momentum for years. And so you don't want that. You want to hit those things head on. So again, no rocket science here. Whatever concerns you, whatever concerns your customers, whatever's concerning your enterprise, talk about it. You don't have to resolve it right away, but you do need to talk about it. So what were our goals? Time to value. This is the biggest thing that is the Un-carrier move for the technology group. How do we build software faster? How do we simplify our solutions? How do we drive customer value to the customer quickly? Okay, Peraso brought up a couple of use cases there. Why do I want to build servers when I can just rent an EC2 instance? It's a great example, right? It's really simple. We want our engineers building value for our customers. Elasticity. I'm going to walk through a use case here in a few minutes that explains why elasticity matters so much to T-Mobile. But at the end of the day, our business is not static like this. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up. It's got a cycle, it's got a rhythm. The digital systems all have a rhythm, and we don't want to build for the high watermark. We want to right-size it as we go. So elasticity really matters. Innovation. How do we help our developers innovate? And why are they innovating? Because they love their customers. Because they want to give their customers better features. They want to give them better value. And then, of course, security. And security is a bar raiser on this thing. What we want to do is actually raise the bar for security by going to the cloud. and we wanted to push toward a zero trust model. And these were all lofty goals. And I'm not even sure I can say we've attained every single one of these goals, but we have made great progress up the ladder to attaining these goals. And I hate to say it, but the goalposts seem to move. The smarter we get, the more you have to do, right? The more you know, then you have to go solve those problems. But it's a fantastic journey. So this is the journey overall from 2013, and as you can see in the lower left there, I'm just going to rattle these things off. We were an analog shop. We had a waterfall SDLC. It took us 300 days to deliver software. We did massive enterprise releases 4 times a year. 4 times. The business and tech teams, we were working in silos, weren't getting along too well at times, but that's where we were. Then we introduced the cloud and our on-premise systems, and we wanted them to move together to the greatest extent possible. If we learned something in the cloud, we wanted to take it to the data centers. If we learned some new techniques in the data center technology, we wanted to bring it to the cloud if it fit. So it was all a matter of being a bar raiser when we went to the cloud. Okay? Paras talked about the people, process, and technology that's necessary to move to the cloud. So I just want to pull out a couple of things here. You notice our 6-to-1 contractors outnumbered employees. We did a workforce transformation where we actually hired more people, raised our in-house talent, pushed the ratio lower, and we did another thing called roles clarity to simplify the roles we had in the company. We had probably 45 different definitions of software engineer. You know what? There's only one. There's one, and you have 3 or 4 levels of that workforce. So when you get to process, we're fully waterfall, fully. And then we started moving into agile. And we're doing agile quite well in our teams, but we have pockets of excellence. We don't have it completely uniform yet, but we are getting there, and we're getting there quickly, and that makes it a lot of fun. And then technology, it's all about moving faster. There's so many things we can talk about technology here, especially when you're talking about decoupling the monolith. Paras hit the big ones. Get your event-driven architectures going. Make sure that you're doing domain-driven design. And my all-time favorite is make sure you work that strangler pattern. It works. It can get you there. You just have to have the courage to go do it. Don't forget about investing in your APIs and microservices. And Paras hit on this earlier too. You start out at IaaS, but then you can move to PaaS. Then you move to FaaS. And as you climb that curve, you are building software for the benefit of your customers, not for the benefit of building the infrastructure. And that's a really, really good thing. One thing I do want to call out on the technology, huge thing, don't forget this. Observe and automate everything. If you can observe it, you can improve it, okay? And if a human can do it, software can do it. You can figure it out, okay? So whittle away at that problem all the time. So keys to success. I do want to spend a few minutes clearing this slide. So Paras mentioned 7 elements earlier in his presentation, and these are the 4 that I pulled out that mattered the most to T-Mobile when we really think about it. So executive sponsorship. This boils down to figure out what's motivating your executives. If you are doing a database consolidation, for instance, if that's what's motivating your executives, you may want to go down that migration pattern. Okay? If you're going for business agility or you're going for enterprise transformation, you may want to go to re-architecture or directly to cloud native. So figure out what they want. Okay? It's not one size fits all. I did a quick Google search and I found a list of like 20 different reasons for going to the cloud, and I'm like, holy cow, I didn't even know they existed. So everybody's different, okay? Once we had the executive sponsorship, we created a cloud governance board. So remember when I was talking about all the things people were worried about? We asked the heads of state of security, technology, procurement, enterprise risk, finance, to attend a meeting once a month for years to talk about the cloud and what we're doing in the cloud and how we're getting in the cloud and what it means to transform T-Mobile from where we were in 2013 to where we are today. And we still have this cloud governance board. We now meet once a quarter because the change isn't as rapid. That we have a lot more understanding across the board. But that is one thing that really works, and it works well if you get into it. Cloud Center of Excellence. This is, we decided early on we would have a centralized nucleus of the cloud called the Center of Excellence that would create your best practices and your patterns, your reference architectures. They were expected to be the best of the best. They were expected to buy really cool shirts like this for me. These people were to lead the march to the cloud. But we also wanted to federate solutioning to all of the teams. So anybody who came to the cloud, we had certain things that you had to do, and the other things were considered best practices, and they could go do whatever they wanted at that point. Okay, so then we created a feedback loop. So if one team did something brilliant and we said, hey, we want to bring that into the core and teach everybody, we had a way to do that. And so that's where you get into the culture of learning and iterating. How do you get, for a massive workforce, we have over 200 teams working in the cloud right now. If one does something that you want to share, how do you share that with the other 199? It's not an easy thing to do. We do things like office hours. We do summits like this internally where we talk about this stuff and we share. So now let's get into some use cases. This is our Elastic use case right here, and it's called NPI. It's our new product initiative. So every time one of our manufacturers releases one of these things right here, their devoted fans flock to a specific date and time to be first in line to get the new iPhone or get the new Samsung or whatever the device is. It's a huge event for us. We also have a lot of retail partners like Best Buy, Walmart, Target, and others that are working with us to sell these things and activate on our network. And these put huge, huge stress on our system. And I can't underemphasize the word huge. So I'm going to show you how huge this is. This is the graph of what happens within the first few minutes. That vertical line is what happens in seconds or minutes on the night or morning of NPI. So what you see there on the left, as it gradually ramps up, it's people pressure testing, see if they can get in first. And of course, not available, not available, not available. Then you get that radical spike to the top, and then it starts working its way down. Over 24, 48 hours, sometimes 72 hours, we're back to normal. So this is not something that is easy to handle, and it's not something that we can be successful at without a lot of pre-planning and thought. And one of the techniques we have to do here is we actually build out our stacks. We turn off all of our ELBs, and we build it out to some max value that marketing is estimating this will happen. And we perf test it, and we make sure we're ready, and then we go. Then as we get into that curve on the right-hand side of the graph there, then we can turn the ELBs on, and we can start shutting instances down on their own. So you learn these techniques as you go, depending on your use cases, but this is a really unique use case that we see a dozen times a year. We see it on Black Friday. We see it on Cyber Monday. Not quite as pronounced as this, but we see it. It happens a lot. So let me do a quick deep dive on this use case here. This is our cart management system. And at the heart of the system is these carts. So the blue stacks right there, they're all independent, and they're disposable. We can run them in any AZ in any region. And the deployment and teardown is fully automated, of course. We get the products, prices, and promotions data single sourced into every single one of those stacks. So they are truly autonomous. They can function on their own and satisfy any customer. What's interesting about this is you see that global DynamoDB down there at the bottom? We take the essence of what's in the cart, which is pretty much your product ID, your service IDs, and your promotion IDs, and we put them into that global DynamoDB. And the only reason we do that is if a stack fails, we maintain user affinity to the stacks. If a stack fails, we can hydrate another stack, and we can hydrate the cart from the global DynamoDB. So now we have highly scalable, highly resilient architecture for getting through this event. And this is just one of our systems, happens to be the cart management. So when we went down this journey, there's a lot of pros and cons, as everybody knows. If you're working on any architecture, it's like, What do we do? What do we don't do? Why? So let's just run through the pros and cons of this thing. Big pro here, we are horizontally scalable. We weren't horizontally scalable before. We were vertically scalable on a database CPU. That's where we were before. The cross-region availability is awesome, and we don't have to synchronize in this model, because remember, we cache every single piece of information in these stacks. Release simplicity, it's really easy to hit the script that says deploy, and really easy to hit the script that says kill it, right? Really simple stuff. And then it enables canary deploy. You can get 10, 20, 30 users on a stack and stop feeding new users to that stack and route them to another stack. Really simple. The cons of this thing, it does increase our operational complexity, and it does increase costs. But to succeed at MPI, it's worth every single penny. Because if you fail in the first few minutes, if you look at that graph again, I just have to do it. If you look at that graph, if you fail on that spike, the climbing that hill, the rest falls apart. You lose the faith of your customers. Okay, let's go to our next use case. We migrated from Kafka to MSK. And we started out, and this speaks to the learning culture and why we learn and why we create these feedback loops and the decisions you have to make as you go. So we have a data ingestion system. It does about 3 billion events a day on 500 gigabytes of compressed data, okay? And it's your classic clickstream solution, so we wanted to use Kafka. It was 2015, MSK didn't exist, no service existed anywhere to do this, so we built our own. We needed it, we went and built it. And no regrets of building it on our own. But one of the questions we always ask ourselves, getting right back to love our customers and getting time to value for our customers, should we be building a Kafka stack? Do we need to do that? And the answer is no. So we revisited this in 2020, and we said, okay, we are woefully behind on our upgrade path right now. Our Kafka version, our version was 0.1, MSK's version was 2.5. So what did we give up just simply being behind on upgrades? Stability. Okay, we were stable in our world, but obviously there are stability improvements that went out there. Security improvements go out in every single version of software. New capabilities go out in every version of software. We were missing out on all of that. And then, of course, the question of operational ease. We had to operate that thing. I would really rather have AWS operate that thing for me. I don't need to do that. My developers don't need to do that. So we decided to re-architect. And we went down this road, and the Kafka model is really simple. You got your producers, your Kafka, and your consumers of the data. Kafka just sits there in the middle. So what we did is we fired up the MSK in a new VPC. We connected it with the ENI private tunnel, and we connected the producers and consumers with two-way TLS across the two VPCs, and then we started moving traffic over there. There's nothing difficult about this. What we're really proud of from a team's perspective is we did not lose any data and we did not suffer any downtime whatsoever doing it this way, which is really big. So let's talk about a couple of lessons learned here. The two-way TLS surprised the team because it actually created a 20 to 30% performance hit on the overall system. And we had about a 15 to 20% CPU increase. So we had to calculate that in there as we were figuring out cluster sizing. We had to calculate all that in the new cluster sizing. So the MSK instance was not the same as our instance at the end of the day as far as cluster sizing. One of the things everybody should keep an eye on is your topic partitioning in Kafka for sure, regardless of what your solution is. If you do not do topic partitioning very well, you won't get that massive parallelism that you're all looking for from a Kafka solution. And then finally, let's get to default configuration. We used most of MSK's default configurations. One of the big ones that we changed was the replication factor. We wanted higher replication. This system, this is an awesome system, I gotta say that. This is a really awesome system. We have never lost data in this system since we built it. It just keeps churning and going and going. So being operationally excellent was one of those things that we're really proud of on this system. Okay, Pross said this earlier too, the journey never ends, and it really doesn't. When I look at everything we've done from moving to the cloud, hybrid agile delivery, APIs and microservices, doing our workforce transformation and our roles clarity, our continuous delivery system, we're now delivering a heck of a lot faster. We went from quarterly releases to over 1,000 releases a day now across the entire organization. And we're a massive organization, by the way. So as we climb that curve, it's just fascinating to see that. Another big win is the 0 to 30,000 microservices. So we're now moving into more platforms as a service, and of course we do functions as a service also. We've all but eliminated operational teams. We used to have entire organizations to do operations. They're gone, okay? And we now have a DevOps and a DevSecOps model. Some teams do it very well. Some teams are still learning, okay? You won't have a linear growth, so to speak, of the maturity of these teams as they get going. Some will do it well, and if they're doing it well, let's see if you can get them to teach other people how to do it well, okay? So what's next for T-Mobile? As we look at the future right now, we are kicking off, like I said earlier, we do Agile very well at the Scrum team level, okay? But we don't do it at scale very well. So we're moving into the scaled Agile framework. We're starting to push that. So we're inviting the business in to the scaled Agile framework, and we're starting to do our planning increments and everything like that so that we're all on the same page of what we're doing and where we're going, all while maintaining our agility. We're also moving from, we are very, very, I don't want any T-Mobile people in here to snicker, we're very project focused. We do projects are the center of everything. We want to build products. Our customers don't consume projects, they consume products, they consume services. So we're going to launch transformation to move from project to product mindset. We're going to adopt things like the HEART framework. We're talking more along the lines of personas versus, hey, we just have to do this flow. You know, personas is a real human being, right? It's somebody, it's not something. And then finally, we're looking at decoupling our value streams from our organizational structure. We're not quite sure how that one's going to go. There's a couple of people in this room that are actually the big brains on that. And it's an interesting concept that everybody goes through as they get there, as they climb this. So a few final thoughts here before I invite Paras back up on stage here. For us, I'm going to say this, that the journey is difficult. And it's challenging, and it's uncomfortable for everybody. Not just the developers, not just the testers, not just the Scrum Masters, the product people, for the executives, for every single person in the chain, this is uncomfortable. And if it's not uncomfortable for you, push a little harder, because it should be. It should be really uncomfortable. But it's also really rewarding. It's exciting. I mean, we've got wins and stories. Employee satisfaction has gone up as we push more of this out and we empower our teams to do more on their own without, quite frankly, managers getting in the way at the end of the day. So it's incredibly rewarding. So it's worth the journey. As I was preparing for this, I was talking to one of the folks at T-Mobile, and he reminded me of something that we are working hard on, because I know there's some T-Mobile people in here, but we're not there yet. And that is leadership supporting failure. Okay. I'm not talking about leadership encouraging failure. I'm talking about supporting failure. Okay. So if you make a mistake, the conversation shouldn't be, hey, why'd you do that? Hey, that really stinks. You got to do better next time. The conversation should be, hey, what'd you learn? How can you prevent the rest of the teams from doing that mistake? That's the way the conversation should change. Now, you as technologists, you should be hard on yourselves. You should be saying, why the hell did I screw that up? Why did we screw that up? Didn't we get enough automation? That's on you guys. But you don't need, you don't need an executive coming down on you saying that. What they should be saying is, hey, can you make sure nobody else in the rest of the organization does this wrong? Because that's a learning culture. So that's my final thought. Paras, I am going to exit stage left.
We don't want to. All right, so thank you so much, Steve. Incredible journey, right? I'd argue, though, if a company of a size of T-Mobile can do it, so can you all. It's really interesting on how he talked about embracing failure. Now, when you think about embracing failure, it's also comes with the culture of experimentation, right? And that's where a lot of the preventive detective guardrails will really help you, because you can not only prevent some of the failures, but you can also potentially look at taking a little bit of a risk and maybe helping them with doing something like detective guardrails, where it goes through another view and making sure that we are learning from that event and making incremental progress across our technology stack. So with that, where is that? It's right here. I want to thank you for your time. We've got about 4 minutes, so Steve, if you want to come back on stage, we can do a couple of questions maybe, if anybody has those. And I'll make sure I stand on the X over here. Anybody?
When you talked about the Costco transformation to MSK, how hard was that to get your adoption? We have a really secure environment. I know that's one of the.
So the question is, you moved from Kafka to MSK. How hard was it from a security perspective, because they have something? Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Because they have a.
Back up to the architecture.
Yeah.
The actual end clients never knew it happened. Zero impact. So if you look at the T-Mobile app, the diagnostic app, they didn't know we were switching out MSK in the middle. Only between the producer and consumers did we change. So we controlled adoption, and we adopted it slow until we had everything right, because like I was saying, the cluster sizing thing alone, I mean, the big aha moment about the two-way TLS and performance issues was, quite frankly, scared us a little bit, right? But as far as the far right and the far left of that diagram, they had no say in it. It just happened. They didn't have to change their code.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Looks like here. All right. So with that, I want to thank you, and I wish you a safe and fun reInvent. And thank you for coming. When you get a chance, please do take our session survey so you can give us feedback on what we did well and what we did not do well. We take feedback very seriously, and we'll make sure we work on it so that we can continue providing great content to all of you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.